you for coming to this sneak peek webinar presentation for UChicago Alumni Association Career Month. My name is Linda Pantel, and I work with the Alumni Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. Career Month is throughout the month of November, where we will be bringing you a month of free online career programming tailored for UChicago alumni of all degree types, years, and industries. Each program is an opportunity to learn from successful Maroons who are leading at the top of their fields. Today, I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled Stand Out and Level Up in the Workplace with our speaker today, Mo Akintunde. He is a marketing and branding expert in the Chicago area, as well as an alum, and it is my pleasure to hand the controls over today to Mo.
So thank you, Linda, and thank you, University of Chicago. It's an honor and a joy to share my expertise in personal branding at my alma mater. So again, thank you. And hello to everyone out there. I'm sure that there's still folks trying to make it to this webinar. And for all of you that are here on time, I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy afternoon to join this webinar entitled Stand Out and Level Up in the Workplace. As Linda mentioned, my name is Mobolaji, and as you see on the screen here, that's my Twitter handle. So throughout the conversation today, if there's things that I say, any zingers that strike a chord with you, and you wish to tweet that out, feel free to do so and just @ me, because I'd love to continue the conversation with you on Twitter. Now, I'm excited about this next hour I have with you to help you begin building your personal brand for professional success. But just before we jump into things, I'd like to get a quick pulse on who we have online. So we're going to take a quick poll.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation. We have some good answers coming in. I'll be closing this in just a second. Thank you. And it looks like we have 38% of you identify as self-employed, 52 work for someone else, and 10% of you work for somebody else and have a side hustle.
Great. Thank you, Linda. And so just to make sure I got that, so it's about 38% of you that are self-employed, a little more than half are work for someone, and then you got about 10% that do that work for someone side hustle thing. So thank you. It's great to finally get a sense of who we have here joining with us today. So let's just get right into it, okay? Today, there are 3 main points that I want to speak to, and I invite you to take them. I invite you to take these 3 points that we go over, reflect on them, and maybe even try them out in your workplace between now and the weekend, okay? So the first point that we're going to touch on today is going to be about knowing your purpose, because to really build a personal brand that works, you really want to start with knowing who you are, knowing your purpose. And so today we're going to talk about tips and ways to uncover who you really are, such that it puts you at a competitive advantage. And then after that, we want to take a look at how do you identify who's who in the room? Again, from a personal branding standpoint, once you know who you are, you now want to start to go out in the world and find out who's who. Who are those key people in the office, right? So today we're going to talk about, and I'll share with you, how you can start to engage with folks in the room. In some instances, I like to even tell people in the building, on all the floors. Yes, literally in the building, right? So you get to know who's who in the room. And from there, I will provide some creative ways of how you can go about doing that, right? And I understand about half of us on this webinar today do work for someone. So I hope that this is really of value to you as we get into that section. And then the last point that we'll touch on right before we jump into the Q&A is raising your hand. So what do I mean by that? Well, in that section, I'm gonna share with you how you can start to identify key moments and key opportunities to brand yourself positively in the minds of your coworkers and your bosses, okay? So to start off, you might just be asking or be thinking, so what is branding? Well, according to Steve Jobs, branding is the way a company resonates with people emotionally. It's that chance to make a memory. Now, how can anybody not remember Apple when considering a smartphone, right? Like Apple, though, you too are your own brand, the brand that we call you. So you're your own CEO. And as your CEO, you want to determine what are those steps necessary to have others know about what you care about, know about your purpose, and as you start to share that out with what you could call your customer base. But we'll talk more about that shortly. Now, I trust we can all agree on two things here. First thing, would you agree that people are experiential by nature? From the looks of this image on the screen here, you see the young girl experiencing for the first time Play-Doh. I think that can confirm that people are experiential by nature. And secondly, people's perception is their reality. For example, it's easy for someone to perceive all Lyft drivers as the same. I'm sure you guys have been in a Lyft or Uber, and what's that connotation that Lyft has? That they're safe drivers, they actually care about the passengers, right? And all Lyft drivers tend to be the same, right? So the question is, how does one Lyft driver differentiate herself from other Lyft drivers in the same neighborhood? Maybe some have candy in the back while others have water. Some are playing the vibes, good music, while others are not, right? But start to think about that. How does a Lyft driver differentiate herself or himself from other Lyft drivers in the same neighborhood? And of course, you guessed it, it's personal branding. Personal branding allows you to differentiate yourself from everyone else who looks or offers the same thing you do. Now, you might think that creating a personal brand is unnecessary and your work should speak for itself. And I hear you loud and clear if that's how you feel. However, in these times today, 2018 and beyond, your branding could be the difference between getting noticed or not. Now, you may desire consideration for a promotion or a bonus at your job, or you may just want to get acknowledged and recognized for the hard work and the dedication you're putting in. Well, you can have difficulty setting yourself apart from the crowd, especially if nearly everyone at your job has the same great ambitions. Standing out often involves not simply blending in and conforming to the workplace itself. And I know this could be very risky. So let's just say it again. Standing out often involves not simply blending in and conforming to the workplace itself. So the first step we're going to take in building a personal brand for the workplace is by you getting to know your purpose. And what are those key elements in getting to know your purpose? While there's no one pathway for discovering your life's purpose, there are many ways you can gain deeper insights into yourself and a targeted perspective of what that is you have to offer the world. Your life works sits in the intersection of your talents, your passions, your skills and expertise, and your deepest value. That is the value that you provide other people. So I'm going to ask 4 questions, and I want you to reflect on each of these questions as we go through them in this webinar. And I want these questions to help you find that sweet spot that sits in this intersection between what you care about, what you want to contribute or what you can contribute, and where you provide the most value. So the first question, what makes you come alive? When you're working towards things that inspire you, it literally makes you feel more alive. It's all about connecting with what your passions are about. When you focus your attention on endeavors that put a fire in your belly, you grow your impact and you influence in ways that nothing else can. And influence is very important when we're talking about personal branding. So when you're focusing your attention on endeavors that put the fire in your belly, I know some of you have had that fire in your belly where you just believe, where you just know, where it makes you come alive. Well, that grows your impact and your influence in ways that nothing else can. What are your innate strengths? In that element, I don't know if you've all read The Element by Ken Robinson. He says that your element, quote unquote, your element is the point at which natural talent and skill meets personal passion. So I'm sure you guys have been in your element at some point in time. When Michael Jordan, back in his heydays, and you see him go to the rim, one could say he was in his element, right? When people are in their element, they're not only more productive, but they add more value and enjoy more personal and professional fulfillment. Accordingly, it's also often where they also tend to make more money. And I know we're talking to professionals today. So when we talk about more money, you definitely want to consider being in your element and leveraging your innate strengths. Next question. Where do you add the greatest value? Again, I want you to be reflecting on these questions. Maybe even start to consider and think about, how can I put this in action when I get off this webinar and go back to work again? So the question, where do you add the greatest value? Doing work that you're good at, but which you loathe, is not a pathway to fulfillment. That said, knowing your greatest strengths and where you can add the most value through the application of your education, skills, knowledge, and experience can help you focus on the opportunities, roles, and career paths where you are most likely to succeed, and therefore find the greatest sense of accomplishment and contribution. Too often we undervalue our strengths. I mean, I gotta say, as I've been learning about this, I've definitely, in many years, I've undervalued my strengths. I've undervalued my skills and the expertise we naturally acquire over time. But as you start to get to know yourself and you know your purpose, you can start to reframe the concept of adding value through the lens of solving problems. You can ask yourself, what are you well placed and equipped to help solve problems within the workplace? Through your career, through the organization, maybe at the industry level. You can also ask yourself what problems you really enjoy solving and start to hone in on those problems that you love solving, thereby being an asset and of value to the people that you're helping solve those problems. And the last question, what do you stand for? Again, reflect on this. What do you stand for? And I believe you will get a copy of the deck or the video at the end, so you don't have to memorize these questions now. You will get the video at the end, but just reflect for a moment. What do you stand for? People who don't stand for something, you know it, that's right, they fall for everything, and they fall for anything. So deciding how you want to measure your life means making a stand for something and then living your life in alignment with it, okay? Now, we're gonna go ahead and talk about, once we know who we are and we identified our purpose, the next step in building your personal brand for professional success is to get to know who is in the room. Who is in the room? I know it's kind of a novel idea. You may know everybody in your office, but do you really? Knowing who's who at the office allows you to have a competitive advantage, as we stated before. You can easily start to play to other strengths and their weaknesses. And you know where folks stand relative to yourself and to others. So some creative ways to get to start to know people and know who's in the room. The first thing I like to tell people is introduce yourself to everyone. Again, not a novel idea, not a novel concept, but I promise you, most people are really nervous and tend not to do that unless circumstances have it that they need to. But introducing yourself, and when I say that, I'm talking about introducing yourself from the custodian up to the CEO and the president in your office. You want to ask, in introducing yourself, you want to ask questions or maybe even acknowledge what people are wearing. Something small like that can go a far way. And you never know what they'll tell you that could, again, put you in a competitive advantage. Do your online research. With a plethora of channels to learn more about people. Like channels, I'm talking about Facebook, LinkedIn, which I'm sure predominant of you all listening probably use as a resource, Twitter, Instagram. These are some really great channels to start to do some research and learn more about the folks that you work with, right? Start to discover their backgrounds, their ethnicities. What types of things are they interested in? Where do you share similarities? Where there might be some differences, where there might be some questions you want to ask because there's things you want to know, like their culture. like the types of food that they eat. Again, I know this is a very easy task, and some of us just forget to do that. So when you do your online research, you start to think about how can I utilize the things that I see and I learn about my coworkers to strike that conversation, maybe to introduce myself for the first time because I never have. Okay. And then the last thing, some of you might be uncomfortable doing this, but I definitely tell you there's an opportunity in doing this, is make an invitation to lunch. Invite your coworkers to lunch. One-on-ones are amazing. Coffee dates, it's phenomenal, right? But then the question would be, what do you say to them when you're sitting right across from them? Well, this is where you really have the opportunity to really start to build the relationship. So take a coworker to lunch and start to get to know them. You can ask them questions, but really what you want to do is listen. So when you ask the question, don't step over the question. Ask the question and then listen. People love to talk. People love to talk about themselves if you let them. And you've been at your job for many, many years. If you've been at your job for many, many years, and then you know everyone, there may be certain things that you still don't know, right? So take them out to lunch anyway. People also love to share their opinion. In this case, you want them to. And it works really well when you let them know that they can be brutally honest with you when they start to give you feedback on things like when you ask them, hey, what do you think my strength is? Or better yet, what do you think my weakness is? By them sharing with you, contributing to you what your strengths and weaknesses are, the intention is not to feel some type of way about it. The intention is so that you can strike a conversation and start to make the environment a lot more comfortable for them to be honest with you. And inside of doing that, you can build a lot more intimacy and you can start to build that relationship with that individual or those individuals, those coworkers. And then the last step in building your personal brand for professional success is to raise your hand and begin leveling up. Now that you know where you add the greatest value, as we talked about earlier, as you reflect on where you add the greatest value, you can be creative in how you deliver it to your boss and your coworkers. You can start to do things like request to participate in what they're up to, especially if you have a strength in that area. Sometimes people don't even think about that. Sometimes it takes you requesting. Folks don't come to you all the time and say, hey, I need your help, or hey, your expertise could be well suited in this particular area. Sometimes, really most of the time, to really stand out, it takes you going to those individuals and sharing with them how you can help them in what they're doing, especially if you have strength in that area. So start requesting to participate. And I promise you, you will stick out like a sore thumb in a good way. Offer constructive criticism, not just complaints. I'm sure you've heard this time and time again. Complaints do not provide any value. People don't like to be around complainers, but people love to be around folks that offer constructive criticism and even solutions to the criticism. So consider that the next time you think about how do you stick out and how do you stand out from others, offer constructive criticism. And don't be embarrassed about it either. And the last thing, do things outside of work and your job title. Now, I know from all the folks on the webinar right now, the hobbies can span from skiing to shooting photography, right? Whatever that area is that you love, now more so than ever these days, you really want to start to be an expert in that area. You want to start to learn more about that area. And it doesn't have to do with your job title. It doesn't have to do with the company that you work at. Identify that thing that you love to do, identify that area where you have strength, and start to pursue it. Again, you're the brand called you. So it's about you as your business. How are you building up that trust and that credibility? So folks at the job and folks outside of the job now need to come to you as a trusted authority in that area or as a thought leader in that area. That's the opportunity that we have these days. And that's the opportunity that I'm definitely enlisting and enrolling you all to consider. So reflect on this as you go through your day. Because regardless of age, regardless of your position, regardless of the business that you happen to be in, all of us need to consider the importance of branding. We are CEOs of our own companies. called Me Inc. To be in business today, our most important job is to be the head marketer to the brand called you. So I'm going to park it here, and now I'd love to take a Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. Please keep the questions coming in. Here's a question for you. You are an expert in this. When people ask you what your personal brand is, do you have a sentence or a list to respond to that? Is that something that you advise folks to build for themselves?
Great question. Well, first off, I would definitely say most people are not going to ask you what is your personal brand. However, they may ask you, what do you care about? Or they may ask you, what is it, where do your expertise lie? Or they may ask you, what are you passionate about? But no one really walks around and just says, hey, what's your personal brand? Again, your personal brand is people's perception of you. So the question really should be more so, what do you say your personal brand is? And are you reflecting that such that those that experience it outside of you can actually agree that what you say your brand is actually is? So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. How would you go about building up your personal brand if you are not currently employed and you are looking for a new career path?
Like I shared in my last slide, start to look at those areas where you have strength and that excite you, right? There may be hobbies, there may be areas where you said, you know what, someday, one day, I'm going to pick up a microphone and I'm going to start to sing, right? Start to focus on that. Now, you may not necessarily be the best, right? And you may, but nonetheless, start to do things outside of your occupational structure, so to speak, and really start to get known for being the best in that area to which you are.
Thank you. We have one more question about this exercise of crafting your own personal brand. What would a personal brand statement look like? If you, again, just to work on this for your own self-discovery. And is it useful to develop one to ground yourself over time and throughout your career?
I've never really heard of a personal brand statement. It's more like, I guess you're speaking more to like an elevator pitch of some sort, I would imagine. But if I were to look at what would be a personal brand statement, it would be more so, what is your purpose, right? What do you care about? So for me, what I care about is inspiring and building brands, fans, and leaders. That's what I care about. So I do things like this. I speak at forums and panels, sharing with folks how they can start to build their own brand and how they can be self-expressed in who they already are. They don't have to be anybody different. They just need to be more of themselves and being confident enough to share about what it is that they care about, what they stand for, and what they care about. Yep.
Great, thank you. That's a great phrase. Don't try to be someone else, try to be more of yourself. Can you elaborate on the phrase leveling up and what that means, perhaps socially, professionally, or in other realms?
Definitely. I know I bring in a little slang, a colloquialism here. Leveling up, it means the ability to not just manage up, but over time, get those bonuses that are owed to you. Get that promotion that's owed to you. And not like it's owed to you because your boss said, hey, I owe you a bonus. But it's owed to you because you've been such a key player in the place that you work at. You brought value to other areas that your boss or other coworkers didn't even know that you had. That's what I mean by leveling up. Leveling up is about identifying areas where you can be well known for having an expertise in a particular area, and then after being well known, utilizing that opportunity to go after that promotion or that bonus.
Thank you. What are some recommendations you have for people who work in highly competitive companies where most of your coworkers are already doing and even competing with you on the things you advise?
So there was one area in the slide where I shared about to stand out, sometimes you simply should not blend in and not conform. So there may be areas where if it's competitive because everyone is playing the game of standing out, maybe that's not the game that you play, which in essence will be standing out, right? Unfortunately, I don't have further detail as to what that profession would be to really start to give you more nuanced answer. If you could provide a little bit more information as to what type of job that would be, I can probably provide a better answer.
Great. We'll see if any clarifying responses come from that question. We've gotten several questions about visual design and personal brand, and specifically social media and how to leverage that to build your personal brand.
That's one area I definitely didn't touch on. I love the fact that someone brought that up. You're talking about content, right? Content is king. And nowadays, where digital is pervasive from the mobile to desktop, right? How do you scale yourself? It's through content. How do you make people feel? How do they feel your brand? How do you leave that memory, like Steve Jobs said, through content and messaging? So content is very important, from video to text to copy, right? And leveraging those channels, social media channels, leveraging a website. You'll see more and more nowadays, individuals like myself, a lot of individuals, whether they be artists, writers, photographers, painters, folks that are highly specialized in a key area, they have a website. Generally, their website is their first name and last name.com or something to that structure, right? You may want to consider actually having a website. And on that website, starting to share about those things that you care about and those areas where your natural talent and strength and skills lie.
What would you recommend for folks who perhaps do not identify themselves as designers? How can you go about building that content and that online presence?
Well, you can always have consultants. So if that's something that you really see, branding yourself, starting to leverage social media, right? Nowadays, you got designers and photographers. I almost feel like everybody's a designer and photographer these days. And I say that facetiously, of course. But you don't need to have the skills. Just understand what it is that you provide. Maybe you might not even know how to articulate that. But now you can start to hire consultants to help you flesh out your brand, like myself. Generally, what I do is I'll go in and meet with someone, and again, they may not be creative, or they say they're not creative. They may not know how to use Adobe, but they're very clear on what are the things that they like and the things that they're good at and the things that they're not good at. And through a few conversations, few questions and answers, I can help them start to flesh out what does what does it look like visually to express that brand, and how can you start to tease out content in some type of frequency that will now have the audience, your spectators, your fans, those that are liking you, how they can start to really understand what your brand is about and call your brand the way you see your brand to be.
Thank you. What are some ways you recommend to building your personal brand if you're more introverted? How can you build that brand externally?
I had a feeling I was going to get someone to ask me a question such as that. Well, there's two parts to that. When someone says that they're introvert, I assume that they mean that either they're nervous to go and talk outside, not literally outside, but in terms of they like to be alone more so than being social. I think that introverts, like artists, if you imagine, most artists are actually introverts, but yet they can step on the stage and pour their heart out because they're telling stories. So I don't necessarily think that as building your personal brand, although yes, you do want to be out there and engaging, right? You can still be an introvert while building your brand. You can use content to build your brand in that respect. And again, your brand is about what people believe, what people think your brand is, right? So therefore, how do you share about the things that you care about? You can do that through other ways than opening up and talking with people, if that's something that doesn't work for you.
Thank you. Great advice. How do you incorporate more long-term professional goals into a person's view of your personal brand? If perhaps, what you want to be doing isn't what you're doing right now, how can you build a brand that takes into account some of these things you wish to do in the future?
Start doing it. The future doesn't exist. The future is now. The future is now. The future is every second, right? Start doing it. Again, you don't have to be an expert in it yet if it's something that you're passionate about. Start doing it. Repetition, practice will get you better.
That's a great response. Very enthusiastic. In a similar vein, how should you build a brand, perhaps when what you do outside of work is very different than what you do maybe to volunteer or these other facets?
Say that one more time.
How should you build a brand when what you do, I think perhaps at work, is very different than what you do outside of, perhaps in your volunteer capacities?
So how do you build your brand in the workplace when what you do outside of, when there's something else that you do differently than work outside? Well, I definitely say that it's almost like a two-step in certain instances where if the thing that you're doing outside of work is something you're passionate about, start to share about that. Let that start to trickle into your job. Let people start to see you doing something opposite of what you're doing. Let's say you do sales at work, right? But what you really love to do is cook. Well, open up a Pinterest page and start sharing recipes. Then start sharing that Pinterest page and recipes with folks in your job that care about some of the food that you might have brought to work to share, right? And over time, people start to know you as that person that is a great pastry chef or a great chef in general, right? So it's not so you have to be in folks' face about what you do. It's about just being self-expressed in the areas that you love and sharing that self-expression such that it's palpable for people around you. And it's exciting and they want to experience the experience that you have around the things that you love to do.
That's great. We had a comment come through the box of an example of somebody who is already doing this. She says she's a lifelong dancer outside of work, but works professionally in leadership development. So she sends positive leadership newsletter using the dance of lead and follow as an analogy for business leadership.
Fabulous. That's amazing. That you're now curating, excuse me, I should say you're now cultivating a unique way of communicating leadership through moving your body. That puts you in a unique position where now you can start to stand out. And as you continue to do that and you start to get more visibility around that, that becomes now what I like to call your widget. And now folks want to hire you for that widget. When what you do professionally is leadership development, you've now found a new lane that is coveted your lane in how you express leadership development through dance. So I think that's phenomenal, actually.
There's another question about a sort of a different angle, complementary angle to the introvert question. We've got some more clarification. As introvert not meaning being nervous or shy, but if you prefer to perhaps spotlight others rather than being the spotlight, how can you build a personal brand around that?
Well, it depends. So I would imagine this is kind of interesting because back in the day, I used to manage talent. So I'm going to answer your question in this way. Back in the day, I used to manage musicians, singer-songwriters, and producers. And the position I played was behind the curtains, but behind the artists, right? As my artist started getting successful, naturally people wanted to know who was that element or who was that force behind that successful artist. So I say that to say, as you continue to bolster up others and those folks are doing well and you're bringing value to those others, to those people, naturally folks are going to want to seek and find out who's behind that and how can I either have that person to help me, or let me just acknowledge who was behind you, or who was behind the people that you were bolstering and supporting. Let me just acknowledge who that is because it's amazing. So there's still elements in standing out and building your brand even when you're not in the front. Did that make sense?
Yes, that we gotta thank you that does make sense.
Keep contributing.
Yeah, right. We have a clarifying question to something that was asked earlier about when you're working in highly competitive environments. So this competitive environment is, the phrase is people who are often jockeying in the spotlight in investment banking, management consulting, or big tech companies.
Okay. So what's I didn't get the question.
I think the question is how can when you're working in these environments where everyone is working on a personal brand and trying to stand out, how do you differentiate yourself within that highly competitive environment where everybody is already trying to do this?
Okay. Well, the first thing is get to know who everyone is in the room, so everyone knows you, right? And I'm gonna assert that maybe not everyone is actually doing that, right? It may occur like they're working on their own thing, trying to build their brand, which is one aspect, but they may not be focusing internally and getting to know who everyone else is. So that's one thing. The second thing is focus on the areas that you're strong in. And I know I've said this before, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here by any means, but focus on the area that you're strong in. I'm clear that there's going to be either areas where what you're strong at can be of value to someone else. And in that case, go and contribute. Because the idea is that you want to start to, and I say this in a very positive way, you want to start to infect others such that you leave a memorable you leaving them with a memorable experience. That's what it's about, right? It's while others are trying to one up one another, you're here trying to help those people, right? So at the end of the day, everyone's coming back to you because you were helping everyone versus doing it all for yourself.
Thank you. Can you elaborate more on the concept of who's in the room and how that can be applied to people who freelance? This particular example, this person does music production and soundtracks for a small group of regular clients. So how do you grow that base and add more people to the room?
Okay, so I hear two things inside of that question. So let me just first speak to know who's who in the room. The idea of knowing who's who in the room is all about engaging the folks that are in your your proximity. In this case, at your workplace, right? Because we're specifically talking about standing and leveling up within the workplace, right? So in your environment of the studio, yes, knowing who those artists are that are coming to your studio that you're recording, knowing what they care about, not just knowing their name, but knowing what they care about, knowing about their musical content, knowing where they're pulling their stories from, because these musicians are telling stories. Where are they pulling their stories from? What does their background consist of? Right? That's what knowing who's who. It's really about building a relationship, getting related, really getting to know who are those people around you.
Can you elaborate on what do you do if you're working in a small environment? If your natural working habits don't allow for a ton of interaction with a lot of different people to help build that brand, what are some other ways that you can either find more people or build a brand when you interact with fewer folks?
Well, the question would be: are you first interested in building your brand within the community or the environment, that small community environment that you're in? Because that might not be important to you. You may want to build a brand outside of that. You may want to build a brand more leveraging the web, right? So in that instance, if you are passionate and interested about building the brand within that community, then my answer would be engage that community. As small as it is, engage them. Find things that they care about. Find similarities. Start to help. Start to bring your expertise to areas that can bolster other people up and make requests of people, right? If you're not fully interested in branding yourself within that community, then leverage content and leverage the internet, leverage social media, and start to share your content outwardly and start to attract the folks that actually care about what it is that you do. So it really depends on where you stand in that respect.
That's very helpful. We have another question, and I think this term comes from some other things that folks might have heard around the concept of personal branding, is that once you've successfully crafted several memorable experiences, the sort of like stories that you can tell as you're meeting other people, how do you leverage that, and when do you employ those?
So you're saying give it to me one more time.
Once you've successfully crafted several memorable experiences,
okay, yes.
Either with other folks or as part of your own, personal brand, the ways that you can share that with people, how do you actually do that? And how does timing factor into this? When do you do it?
Well, so when you talk about building up memorable experiences, I'm going to imagine that you're talking about experiences with someone else. So engagements, right? You've built up a lot of engagement with a handful of folks at your job, right? And so now, how do you take advantage of that? Well, you have been by virtue of having those interactions and touch points with those same people or different people within your community or work office. You start to leave an imprint and an impression on who you are for them, right? The value would be go in and start to ask those people so that you're not making it up. Start to ask them, so how do you occur for them? Again, where do they see that you bring value? In case maybe it may not be clear for you, or you may think that you bring value in one particular way, but once you start to audit that community, those folks that you've engaged, audit those experiences that you've had, they now can start to bring you value. And in using those data points and that value, you can now start to level up and engage further with those same people, but now having a better understanding of where you stand and who you are for them. And again, that builds a more deeper and intimate relationship as well.
Thank you. We're getting a few more questions about if you are working in a place where perhaps the company culture doesn't foster a lot of interactions, or you're working in small groups where they don't interact as much, how can you change that to build a brand for your own professional advancement or rewards?
Perfect. That's a great opportunity. Start engaging. Like literally, you be the only one that steps out on a limb and talks to people. And not literally just talking to people, but you start to get yourself known in that community because you're going to probably be the only one doing it because everyone else, as you mentioned, the culture doesn't offer that. You then do that and watch other people jump on board. That's a great opportunity to stand out immediately. Now I did say earlier, it may take you stepping out on a limb. It may take you taking a risk, right? But no risk, no reward. And trust, I'm not trying to encourage you to do something that's going to get you fired by any means. I know we're kind of talking vague here a little bit, but the idea is there's an opportunity. If the culture is not open, if the culture does not facilitate that type of interaction and engagement, that's where you can actually come in and be the culture that it is that you want that culture to be. Start engaging and interacting with people.
Thank you. What are some of your favorite, you mentioned the importance of listening and asking questions to open up people. What are some of your favorite questions or ways of initiating conversation to engage with people?
Yep. So it depends. If I've already had several instances and engagements with you, then I'll start to get a little bit more focused on. So I'll ask a question that's centered around me. So I'll say something to the extent of, so we've known each other for 3 months or whatnot, and I've never really asked you like, so what's your perception on how I'm working at the office, or I may crack the ice with music. I love to jump on music first, and start to get a sense of what types of artists that person listens to, because that gives me a sense of where there may be some similarities or not in terms of our relationship. And then from there, if it's a genre that I'm not familiar with, then I'll have tons of questions, because now I start to get curiously engaged in, be it rock music, be it country, be it jazz, which I love all of those genres. But it gives me an opportunity to now ask further questions, right? And have that person be the expert, and they'll love to share everything that they know. So now you've opened up the floodgates for conversation. So generally, that's how I start.
Thank you. You had mentioned the Element as being a book that was helpful to you in personal branding. Are there other resources, books, content that can help with this topic?
Most definitely. So Tom Peters, he's an author and writer. He actually wrote the book, The Brand Called You. It first premiered in Fast Company. It was back in, I want to say 97. And then since then, he's released a book called The Brand Called You. It's definitely something you want to read. I'm trying to remember. My mind escapes me at the moment. I could see the name of the book. Oh, my mind blanks me. I'm blanking at the moment. But there are some other brand books that I've read. I can definitely, Linda. Actually, I could send you a list if you don't mind sharing that with the group afterwards. I do have a nice list of periodicals and books that I've read over the years. Now, all of them are not always about personal branding. Some of them are about traditional brands, corporate brands. But as we've in this day and age where employees are looking for more purpose in their job, and employees are looking for more cultures and environments where there's diversity. Um, Brands, companies are now need to be, if they're not, need to be more sensitive to that, which thereby they also need to start to look at what is the company's purpose. Like, what are they really offering the world? And where's, I don't want to call it social impact or cause, but one could say, what is their why? Like, why are they really in existence? And how does that help another? That's what most people are looking for from their employers these days. So I can definitely share that list with you though.
Great, thank you. We will send that out. Can you clarify exactly what you mean when you say what do you stand for? Can you give some examples?
Yes. So Tom's, right? Tom's shoes as a brand, right? We all know that Tom's came in and they were when they first started, they were definitely rebellious in how they came to the market. You buy a shoe, you give a shoe. And one could say what they stood for was that every child at the time, every child in Africa had the liberty and dignity of walking with a shoe and not being barefoot. And of course, all the diseases, diabetes, things that can come with that. But ultimately, it was instilling that dignity. That's what they stood for, right? Um, Apple, I know we talked about Steve Jobs earlier today, and Apple really stood for bringing out the best in humanity through creativity, right? And so that's what they stood for. Now they made computers, right, which made it possible to really bring out the best and bring out the creativity in humanity, right? But what they really stood for was bringing out the best in humanity. Um, Trying to
Can
think.
you, those are excellent examples.
Okay.
So that's helpful for companies. How does that translate to individuals?
Great. So from what you stand for, I mean, it's a hot political climate that we're in right now, right? And one could say, despite wherever you stand with that, you want to look at, so what is it that you ultimately care about in the world, right? Um, what do you believe in, right? So what you stand for could carry and live inside of what is it that you believe in? What is it that you care about? What are those areas that are something you would fight for? That you would say that it represents me, and I can clearly, unabashed, say that this is something that I care about.
Thank you. I think that was helpful. Um, can you distinguish that from what makes you come alive?
Yes. So what you stand for would be more foundational, something that you believe in. What makes you come alive is more so something that you are passionate about, right? Now, they could be one and the same, but they don't necessarily have to be either. Like what makes me come alive is my son, right? Waking up and seeing my son smile makes me come alive, right? The ability to have conversations like this makes me come alive. But what I stand for is building brands, fans, and leaders such that they're inspired and self-expressed in their own right. So now self-expression is something that I stand for, And what makes me come alive is the ability to inspire and share in a forum like this or on stage. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was helpful and clarifying. Thank you to all these wonderful, wonderful questions.
Yes, thank you. These are great questions. Great questions. And I definitely invite you to email me after this webinar if you have other questions. If there are unique cases that you have, if you want to continue the conversation, you can email me. You see my email address on the screen. Or like I said, you can feel free to send me a tweet as well. We can continue the conversation. And thank you again for those that have been participating and asking these amazing questions.
Excellent. So we have one last question to wrap up. I want to be mindful of time. Really, these questions are great, and if you have more specific ones, Mo has been very generous with his time. We'll be able to answer those in an email afterwards. Mo, in one sentence, can you share the key takeaways of your presentation?
Yes. So the idea around standing out and leveling up in the workplace is really giving you a competitive advantage to really be different and differentiate who you are such that it's true to who you are, but it's of value to others.
Excellent. That was beautiful and nice and succinct. Thank you, everyone who attended. These questions it was made for a really great conversation, and thank you, Mo, for your expertise.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, we do have for the rest of November, Career Month. We have many other online webinars and conversations available. So please, I encourage you to check out careers.uchicagoalumni.org and join us for the rest of November. Next week on November 5th, we have Job Search Success in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. The 6th, we have How to Work with Recruiting Firms and many others. So please register then. As a reminder, we will send out this recording. So thank you so much, Mo, and everyone who attended. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.